Hello everyone and welcome to Daily Blitz 06, a look at the franchise options. This might be a bit of a long one, but I'll try to condense it as best I can. I was going to do a Daily Blitz on going through and setting up your weekly strategy, but that is just too convoluted, and I may do it later on down the line, but honestly it isn't going to prevent you from playing the game, and you really can't see a lot of the information that you need to see to make the choices that you need to make. Even OCR doesn't read that properly. So, with all that being said, we're going to look at some of the franchise options that you will want to set either before you actually start your franchise or when you get into the franchise mode itself. So let me go over to the options tab here. I used my R1 button, or the right bumper button, to get there. And I'm going to press A on
Franchise Settings.
Franchise Settings. Let's look in here.
Options. You have three options. League Settings is selected.
You have League Settings,
XP Sliders,
Gameplay sliders, and Gameplay sliders. You can increase the gameplay sliders for your side and or the CPU if you want a bit more of a challenge. I can actually do quite well on franchise on rookie difficulty with the sliders all set to 50, but we're not going to mess with that. We're going to go to League Settings.
Entering career settings screen, you have 46 options. Skill level option is set to rookie is selected.
It's supposed to be League Settings, but it called it Career Settings. I have no idea why. It's called it Courier Settings. I have no idea why it did. League Skill option. This is similar to what you'll find in the main settings, but just know this is separate from the main settings, so you can set this to whatever you want to. You have Rookie.
Skill level option is set to Pro.
By default, the game will have everything set to Pro, but this is Pro.
Skill level option is set to All Pro.
All Pro, and
Skill
finally, the most
All Madden.
The most difficult one everybody sets it to is All Madden, and everybody wants to play on All Madden. Everybody thinks that if you play on All Madden, you're basically all that in a bag of chips. And personally, we can't play at that level. I've tried. I think I did manage to score 21 points on somebody with that mode, but they scored like 62. So you know what? It really doesn't matter. It's an offline franchise. Set it to whatever you want.
Skill level option is set to Rookie.
I have mine set to Rookie in this case. I'm going to leave it there.
Game style option is set to Simulation.
Game style is set to Simulation. EA gives us 3 game styles. The default is set to, I believe it's Arcade.
Set to Arcade.
And that's sort of a more relaxed kind of every mode that's offline will get this. Sort of a more relaxed atmosphere, less penalties.
Game style option is set to Competitive.
Competitive is what online is set to. You will have no assist. You will have no competitive. Is no training wheels, no nothing. And so when you're playing online, this is why we throw so many interceptions. Because we don't have any of the, and why we have such a hard time is because we don't have any of the defensive assists. We don't have anything like that. I like NFL. I like the simulation. And even the simulation is out of date. There are so many different rules now that Madden, I think on the one hand, for realism's sake, they should implement it. But on the other hand, I'm actually kind of glad they didn't, because the refs get too involved. And I'm just going to leave it at that.
League type option is set to All.
League type option, this is basically, do you want it to be basically a combination of local and online players?
League type option is set to Owners Only.
Owners only? Or
League type option is set to Coaches and Owners.
Coaches and Owners,
League
and
type
I think
option is set to All.
Or you can leave it to All. So basically, I misspoke there. The All means, do you want coaches and owners and players that are basically player locked to be able to play? Or do you just want it to be 32 owners that do what they want to? Or do you just want it to be coaches and owners? This really doesn't impact an offline league at all, because it's offline.
Instant starter option is set to Off.
Instant starter, now this will affect you. This basically says that if you have a player that even if they have a lower rating, if they are It basically allows them to be an instant starter. If they are the type of player that wants to start, they will be pushed up the depth chart regardless of what their overall rating is. I like this to be off.
Trade deadline option is set to off.
Trade deadline is set to off. You know what? I love this. I love that EA lets us customize this. I have this off because honestly, I like to trade with the CPU whenever I want to trade with the CPU. And speaking of trading with the CPU,
trade type option is set to enable human.
Enable human trading. What this does is say that, okay, as the human player, I can trade with anybody, but you can't trade with me. Is essentially what that says. There are other options here.
Trade type option is set to enable all.
Enable all means that everybody can trade with everybody.
Trade type option is set to disabled.
And you can disable trading if you want.
Trade type option is set to enable human.
I'll set it back to
Coach
that.
hiring option is set to CPU only.
Don't really need to explain that. Basically, your coach can't get fired with this option. Salary cap option. Oh, please do turn this off to save yourself some sanity. Look, if you want to play with the salary cap on, I'm not saying you can't. I'm just saying it's going to make trading and getting the players that you want a lot harder. Because you have that annoying salary cap to live by, and not every team's salary cap is created equal. They made it, you know what's funny is the NFL made the salary cap to make parity, to make things more fair and balanced, but every team has a different salary cap amount. So to me, that is not fair and balanced. Anyway, moving on.
Superstar abilities option is set to on.
Superstar abilities, whether that's bazooka, whether that is wrecking ball, whether that is pocket deadeye, outside deadeye, there's some other, whatever your case may be, this option enables all of that. Now you can actually go back to Madden before these abilities were enabled if you really don't want to, and you can turn that off. It'll be interesting if I disabled them how my gameplay would be.
Ability edit controls option is set to any player.
You can edit the abilities and add abilities to any player.
Relocation settings option is set to users only.
Relocation settings. If your team has a low enough rating on their stadium, aka if you are the Titans, for example, then you will be able to reassign them and relocate them to a different city, or if you really want to be adventurous, a different continent. Yes, you can actually do that to an extent. And this option just decides whether only your teams that are controlled by the user can relocate, or if the computer can relocate teams as well. It's actually kind of fun to enable this for everybody, because then the computer will go through and relocate teams, and it's quite fascinating to see what they come up with.
Staff talent cost modifier option is set to normal.
Stat talent cost modifier is basically how many talents, how many points does it take to make a certain adjustment. You don't need to worry about this.
Injury option is set to on.
You can turn off injuries if you like. Who doesn't want to have a team that's fully healthy at the end of a grueling season, eh?
Pre-existing injury option is set to on.
Pre-existing injury. If that player got hurt in practice or he fell down the steps and tripped over something, that injury is going to be active for that player before he can play. You can turn this off.
Practice squad stealing option is set to off.
Practice squad stealing. Worse than stealing ships on Miriani, and it really does happen in the NFL. You can steal teams from other players' steal players from other teams' practice squads. To give a really real-life example of this, somebody took one of our players from our practice squad a couple of weeks ago. So it does happen.
Career clock option is set to on.
Career clock option, you know, I really haven't had this explained. I don't know what this does. It's on by default. I know it has something to do with a player's longevity, but other than that, I don't know what it does.
Progressive fatigue option is set to on.
Progressive fatigue, this has to do with the new fatigue system. If you don't want it, you can disable it.
Practice injury option is set to on.
And of course, do you want injuries to happen during practices? That can happen.
Prospect storylines option is set to on.
Prospect storylines, that's kind of a new thing that they've added and worked on since 22. Do you want your up-and-coming prospects in the draft to have storylines with them? I do. I like the immersion.
Full on field control option is set to on.
Full on field control, in essence, you can set this to where even in regular franchise mode, it will only show up to the player that you want to be. I like full on field control, but maybe some of you just don't like it. You can change that here.
Minimum roster size option is set to 46.
Minimum roster size, in-season player movement,
restriction,
player over
off-season player cut limit option, breakout scenarios option.
All of these options have to do with franchise modifications. The first one, how big should the roster be before it's considered a full roster? The minimum is 46. You can raise that to a certain amount. I haven't seen what the full amount is. The next option, the next several options have to do with when these players can move during the regular season. By default, a lot of these are set to unlimited. You can restrict those player movements. You can restrict how many cuts.
Player overcut restrictions option is set to no restriction.
Yeah, no restrictions on cuts.
Player cut limit option is set to unlimited.
Yeah, how many players can you cut? You can set limits on that. Just as a lot of admin control stuff, but it's really cool.
Trait regression option is set to on.
Development trait regression, in other words, if a player gets injured and they come back, are they going to regress? You can make it so that doesn't happen.
Desired X Factor Dev Player is set to 50.
Desired X Factor Dev Player is 50 and above.
Desired Superstar Dev Player is set to 75.
Superstar Dev Players are set to 75.
Desired Star Dev Player is set to 400.
It's 400.
Desired Star Dev Player is set to 400.
That makes no sense. 50, 75, and 400. Go figure.
Quarter length option is set to 10 minutes.
Now we're to the quarter length area. This is the clock options. Quarter length is set to 10. By default, it's set to 6. You can go all the way up to the NFL maximum of 15-minute quarters.
Accelerated clock option is set to on.
Accelerated clock, I don't like this, but there really isn't a way to turn this off. Why I don't like it, it becomes very apparent if you are down and it's inside of 2 minutes. That clock will speed up. It will jump. It will accelerate X amount of seconds. That is, to me, from a realism standpoint, is completely unrealistic. The clocks in the real leagues don't do that, and I see no reason why this game should do it. The only reason why they do it is because it speeds the game up. But from a realism standpoint, it should not happen.
Minimum play clock time option is set to 25.
Minimum play clock time is set to 25.
Time option is set to off.
The best thing that I can tell you is to set the minimum play clock time to off. One moment.